I feel like a lot of what I've done over the past week and and that's fine, and I understand why. Is I've talked a lot about more of the negative instances and experiences that I've had, whether it's being stopped by police, and even for a normal speeding ticket, the gun is always out, or hand on the hip. Um, the demeaning questions about how can you afford this car? What do you do? Uh, why do I have to qualify what I have to you as a part of me going 66 and 65? So I think the reason why I've shared more of the instances in terms of being held at gunpoint by police, or being put in handcuffs but never actually being arrested or charged with any crime is not in any way to try to imply that I've had it so bad in life, or things are so terrible for me. But I think it's more to give a vantage point to others that I feel believe that these instances of police brutality, or mass incarceration, or the murders of unarmed black men and women that pop up on the news almost weekly, it feels like. Um, um, Sometimes it's easy to be more standoffish and assume, because of the character assassinations that the media normally do on anybody. It's sometimes easier, I feel, for people to assume that it's not a broader problem, and it's very limited to. It's not their colleagues, it's not their friends, it's not their neighbors, it's not their doctor. And what I really was hoping to do more so than anything with kind of sharing my story, particularly as somebody that so many people in our industry know, either personally or know of, is to just show how widespread these issues are. And it's a constant struggle that people have to deal with. And it's not, month after month, or quarter after quarter, or even year after year, just decade after decade, that it's continued, and trying to in any way possible use my voice to help bring more awareness to the larger issues. When we have conversations about diversity and inclusion, I think there's a couple of things that we need to keep in mind. It is not necessarily the same across every department in a specific company. And so the example that I've given, which is one that I think people have struggled with, is the massive lack of diversity and inclusion across engineering teams and departments. And what I've said about that in the past is that in that instance, there are not enough candidates to have, I think, the diversity level that people would want or expect. And so it is not something that can be solved just by hiring practices. It goes much deeper into educational access, and developing, STEM education, and getting more females and more Black and Hispanics to become engineers and coders. And so I think that is a much bigger, longer term challenge that requires a solution with set milestones. Where it comes to other departments, your marketing department, your sales, your finance, your account management, operations, I firmly reject the notion that it's difficult to have a diverse and inclusive team in those respects, because there's absolutely not a lack of talent. There's an abundance of talent, particularly in those areas and departments. And so I think it has to do with mentality and culture. One of the issues that I believe, can help fix that is the lack of access to capital that females and minority, particularly Black and Hispanic minorities, have in terms of starting businesses. So when we look at 1% of venture capital going to Black founders, what you find is, generally speaking, and I'm not going to make completely overarching, is that more diverse executive teams, more diverse and inclusive founders build naturally more diverse companies. But if it is far and few in between where those opportunities even come, that's one challenge. And then when we look at the hiring practices in companies not having diversity and inclusion, that's another issue. At the same time, look, nobody wants to be the token black person. Let's keep it real. No one's looking for a handout or just to be given an opportunity. So I'm talking about people that are absolutely qualified to have positions or to be able to start their own businesses or raise capital. No one's asking for some sort of handout in any way. And I think there's more strength in diversity and inclusion. It's not something that people should do to check off a box. I think at the end of the day, it's a business imperative to be able to stay competitive with the future landscape of where this country's going. You know, you kind of get this feel over the last couple of weeks is that we're almost in the middle of a new civil rights movement in this country. Obviously, I'm 39 years old, so I wasn't around in the 60s. But as you hear the stories of the history that you've learned, this type of the protesters and the day after day, and I think the perseverance that people have had. So for example, and I'm going a little bit off on a tangent here, so forgive me, but if you think about it, 4 or 5 years ago, there were people calling the Black Lives Matter a terrorist organization, and it was just this militant, crazy, left-wing, ridiculous thing. And peaceful protests from people like Colin Kaepernick were considered by some absurd and ridiculous to kneel peacefully. People kneel when they pray. But to kneel during the national anthem was a big controversy. And then now you have Fortune 500 brands that are openly talking about Black Lives Matter. Now, talk is one thing, so you have some brands, I won't call them out. You had one brand that had a whole big thing for Blackout Tuesday and Black Lives Matter. Meanwhile, they, have like hundreds of lawsuits for discrimination, not only in hiring practices, but how they treat their own consumers in their stores. So I do think there needs to be authenticism and words without action. As everybody says, talk is cheap. But I do think the fact that just in a matter of 4 or 5 years, the whole mindset that I think people have thought about in terms of something as basic and simple as saying that the life of a certain individual means something. In some respects, it's encouraging. In other respects, it's kind of sad that it's taken 5 years for people just to agree that the lives of certain people have value. In terms of what we can do, I think what's really important is to realize that everybody plays their role, and one of the things that we should not do, and it doesn't matter if me as a black male, or it could be a white female, white male, Hispanic person, is that we can't, I think, force other people to do what we would do. Everybody plays their role. So there's some people that are protesting and marching in the streets. Some people are privately writing letters to their congresspeople. Some people are just educating themselves about maybe their own prejudice or looking for ways to be more inclusive in their organizations. I think there's no right answer for everybody about how things are happening, but I think if we can take this moment in our country, in our industry, in our own personal lives to try to do something, whatever that is, I think there's such a collective strength that can actually lead to some meaningful change. So from that standpoint, as much as there's been difficult conversations to be had or frustrations or just even pain, I think there's legitimate hope. That this might actually lead to some real lasting change in this country.